Okay guys, we are going to learn how to put fractions in order from least to greatest by comparing them using pictures and our knowledge of the benchmark fraction 1/2. Okay, so the fractions we're going to put in order today are 7/10, 1/3, and 5/6. When you're comparing something, we're deciding what's bigger, what's smaller. We're going to use what we know about our benchmark fraction 1/2 to help us along in this process. We're also going to use what we know about making models or pictures. So the first thing I'm going to do is think through this, and I'm going to think, if I had 7 out of 10, well, I know that 5 out of 10 would be half, so 7 out of 10 is more than half. Okay, I know over here with 5/6, if I had 5 out of 6 of something, that's almost the whole thing. So I know that 5 out of 6 is more than half. So I know these two fractions are more than half. Now 1/3, I'm not so sure. I'm going to draw a picture for all of these and kind of compare them using a fraction model. Okay, so you see I have some fraction models here. What I've done is I've drawn the fractions. Notice my pictures are all the same size whole. Even though it's in different pieces, the actual shape is the same size. So if I look at 7 out of 10, so here I have my bar split into tenths, okay? And I have 7 out of 10. So that is more than half, because half would be 5 out of 10. Okay, so now let's look at the next fraction. I have 1/3. So here I have only 1/3, which is less than half, I can see now. And my last fraction is 5 out of 6. So if I color it up to here, 5 out of 6. So right away I can see that the smallest fraction would be 1/3. The next would be 7 out of 10. And the largest amount would be 5 out of 6. So here I have ordered my fractions from least to greatest using a model and what I know about a half. Let's look at another way of thinking about it. So I want to reason. Now what that means is I'm going to take what I know already about fractions in order to put these in order. And the first thing I'm thinking is, I know 7 out of 8 is almost one whole thing. So if I draw a pizza, let's say, and I have it at 8 slices, and I eat 7 out of the 8, I've almost eaten the entire thing. Okay, now I know then that 7 out of 10 is more than a half. Okay, I know I said 7 out of 10. I meant 7 out of 8. So I know 7 out of 8 is more than a half. Okay, so I know that this is more than a half. Now let's think about this fraction 3 out of 5. Now if I don't want to draw a circle and try to cut it into 5 pieces, because that's hard, I'm just going to use squares. And I just kind of want to think, I'm just going to use the squares here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So say I have a candy bar, and me and a friend are going to share it, because I want to try to decide if 3 out of 5 is more or less than a half. So here I drew out 5 squares, because that is how many is in my total. Okay, that's how many pieces my whole is chopped into. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares. Now, if me and a friend are going to split this candy bar, I'm going to say I get one, and then my friend gets one, and then I get another one, and then my friend gets another whole piece, and then we have one left, so we're going to split this one, and I'll get this part, and my friend would get this part. So now looking at this, I can say that if I had if we were going to split 5 pieces in half, I would get 2.5 pieces. So 2.5 is half of 5. Well, this says I have 3 out of 5. So if I had 3 out of 5, that's more than my half mark. So I know that 3 out of 5 is more than a half. So now that I know that 3 out of 5 is more than a half, I want to think to myself, okay, 1/3 is the smallest. And I know that 7/8 is almost 1 whole. And I can see that 3 out of 5 is, I still have 2 pieces left. So that's less than this. So here I have 3/5 would come next. And the largest amount is 7 out of 8. So now you can see kind of another way to think about our fractions in order to order them. Now we're going to take a look at another set of fractions. Here I have 1/3, 2/4, and 1/6. And I want to order them from least to greatest. So right away I'm looking at my fractions and I want to think about what I already know about these fractions. And the first thing I'm noticing, see if you notice it. The first thing I'm noticing is there's something I could do with this fraction. I know that 2 out of 4 things is the same thing as a half. So if I notice I can put a fraction in simplest form, I want to do that first. So now I'm going to think of this fraction as 1/2 instead of 2 out of 4. So now you see the model that I've drawn down here. And I just want to think for a minute about what I notice about my fractions. So I already know that 2 out of 4 is the same as a half. I know that the denominator means how many pieces. And the more pieces in a whole means the pieces are smaller. So looking here, I've made a diagram. Notice I have 0 and 1. And I drew kind of a rectangular box to help me see it more clearly. So right away now I can compare. I have my sixths drawn out, then I have 1/2, and then I have my thirds. So I'm going to go through now and shade in. I have 1 out of 6, or I would have 1 out of 2, or I could have 1 out of 3. Now right away I can see which fraction is the greatest amount, which one is the smallest amount. So I want you to make sure you notice the size of my lines here are all the same when I'm drawing a model. Now it's easy for me to show that 1 out of 6, 1 out of 2, and 1 out of 3. Now one thing I notice, I've got all my lines the same size. But one thing I want you to really understand is here, when I change 2/4 to 1/2, okay, that means now all of my numerators are the same. I have a 1 in each numerator spot. So when I look at that, that kind of means that I have one piece of something. So if I really think about it, what the denominator means how many pieces are in the whole. So, or I kind of think of it as like if I had to share something with somebody. If I had to share something with only 2 people, then I would have a bigger piece. Okay, if I had to share the same with 3 people, my pieces get a little bit smaller. And if I had to share something with 6 people, my pieces get even smaller. So I've noticed that when my denominator goes up, my pieces get smaller. I always think of it as like, that's how many people I would have to share something with. So that helps me to be able to see what fraction is greater. So here I can see that 1/6 is the smallest amount, then 1/3 would come next, and 1/2 or my 2/4 would be next. So now I want you to look at these two fractions, and I want you to decide which is greater, 7/9 or 2/7. I want you to use what you know about a half to make a decision. Okay, now I've roughly sketched in some fraction bars here just to compare. So right away, I noticed that this 7 is close to the number 9, which means that that's quite a bit. 7 out of 9 is more than half. Okay, so I can see, like, if I would fold this in half, that would be my half point. So I know that 7 out of 9 is more than a half. Now let's look at my 2 out of 7. Right away, I can see that 2 out of 7, now I know that 4 is not exactly half here, but you can see right away that 2 is less than half. So 2 out of 7 is less than half. So I can tell just by looking at these that 7 out of 9 is greater. One more example, I have the fraction 6 out of 10 or 6/10. I have 1/4 and 2/3. Right away I want to look and see if I can put any of these fractions in simplest form. I notice 6 out of 10. I'm just going to leave it as is for right now, and I'll see if you can notice what 6 out of 10. Actually, let's just go ahead and put it in simplest form. 6 out of 10, I know 2, it can be divided by 2 evenly, 6 and 10. So that 6 divided by 2 is 3, 10 divided by 2 is 5. 3/5. But I drew my fraction bar into tenths. So let's just go ahead and do our 6/10. Now right away what I notice is 5 out of 10 is half. So right away I can see that 6/10 is greater. It is greater than 1/2. Now I'm going to look at my fraction 1/4. So let's look at 1/4. So here I have a fraction bar in fourths. So here I am going to shade in 1/4. Right here I can see that 1/4 is less than 1/2. So now I'm going to be looking at my fraction 2/3. I'm going to change colors for 2/3. Let's go green. So 2/3. Okay, I'm shading in 2/3. Now I will say, when I look at this, I notice that here is my line for 5 or 3/5 or 6/10, but my 1/3 is greater. So it is greater than 1/2, and it's greater than 3/5. So putting these fractions in order from smallest to greatest, I would have my smallest fraction is 1/4. The next is 6/10. And the greatest fraction here is 2/3.